He's a man that smokes that job will take you for a dive. Wonders if he's still alive. When you smoke that killing job, it will make you very tall. It seems as if you're going to fall. Knock yourself just about fine. You know I mean that killing job. You will think you've blown your top.
Hello and welcome to 420 Law Office. This is Stuart Richland. I've been an attorney here in Southern California going on 21 years, and it's my pleasure to present legal services for patients, co-ops, caregivers, dispensaries, landlords, and doctors, all with reference to the Compassionate Use Act, California's medical marijuana regime. And I hope you've had a chance to look a little bit around the website and take a look at the medical marijuana law comic book. I have claimed it's the first book on the topic. Of course, it's just a comic book, so it's somewhat of a dubious claim, but the truth is that this is a resource that contains a lot of ideas for you to brainstorm over. So although it's a comic book, don't take it too lightly. It does have a lot of good ideas. Also, I would refer you to ASA's website as well as California NORML's website for general research and background on the topic. So one of the things that's on my mind today is the candidacy of Ron Paul. Unfortunately, I don't know that many Californians are aware of Ron Paul's candidacy, or as many as I wish. The mass media has a great deal of trouble with Ron Paul, so it may be that you all know about him, but I haven't heard it because the mass media has been blanking out or blacking out his candidacy. He does stand for completely ending the war on drugs, as well as ending the war in the Middle East, and upholding the Constitution. And if you've been listening to the other podcasts, you know that we've got a real constitutional crisis in this country. The Constitution does not give any power to the President or the executive branch to declare war on a verb or a noun or a group of people other than by declaration of Congress. And so therefore a war on drugs is actually technically impossible. How that perversion of the language happened is just symptomatic of the general propagandizing of the public. But the war on drugs is unconstitutional. At least in the war on alcohol, there was a constitutional amendment, so there was an organized agreement that there should be no access to alcohol, and then that was repealed. So therefore those prohibitions and that repeal were constitutional. This highlights the fact that the prohibition of cannabis, for instance, is not constitutional. If you take a look at the 10th and 9th Amendments, which I've reproduced on the comic book, the generally accepted rights that were reserved to the states and to the people remain the rights of the states and the people, and those rights derive from the infinite, from the natural order of things, described as the Creator in the original documents. They don't derive from the documents themselves. So as you study the Constitution, you determine clearly that the Constitution is nothing other than a limitation on the powers of government and a definition of the proper place of government. The Constitution is the only document to which I have ever taken an oath to uphold. I took the same oath that the President of the United States takes when he takes office. The Founding Fathers were very clear that they set forth the exact oath that the President would have to take. And the oath is to protect and defend the Constitution and the Republic from enemies foreign and domestic. It's interesting that the oath refers to the Constitution itself. The consequences for a president breaking that oath, it's more than just impeachment or not being reelected. Breaking such an oath is treason, which is punishable by hanging and imprisonment. It's also perjury to take such an oath and not intend to keep it. So when I took my oath to the Constitution, I certainly intend to keep it. I don't take oaths that I don't intend to keep. I had a nice opportunity to be interviewed by LA GEM, the Journal for the Education of Medical Marijuana, this month, and I was really happy to see They even put my face on the cover. In there I had a chance to kind of go over how it was that I first got aware of medical marijuana for the general community other than terminally ill patients. And I went through a couple other anecdotes. So if you haven't had a chance to pick up LA Gem, it's generally available. It's free, and it's available at most of the dispensaries and newsstands around town. Freedom of the press is one of the other constitutional rights that our forefathers were smart and had the foresight enough to enumerate so that future generations would have protections for their security and liberty. So freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures. How many of these quaint concepts, habeas corpus, the right to trial, the right to confront one's accusers, the right to petition the government for redress, how many of these quaint little rights have survived the drug war insanity? And when are we going to start to redirect the resources of our country to more important topics and free people to make decisions regarding their own health and their own body? That's the big question. So I hope you get politically involved and find out that Ron Paul stands for completely dismantling the prohibition against cannabis. Also, we've had similar comments from Barack Obama and Clinton. None of the other Republicans, other than Ron Paul, will end the war on drugs. They will escalate it. Ron Paul is running as a Republican, although he embodies the non-neocon form of republicanism that was more like a Ronald Reagan type of Republican, in which laissez-faire, letting business and people do their thing, was supposed to be at least lip-serviced. Of course, we know that Reagan was a disaster, and there's no way to be sure about Ron Paul or any of these politicians. As I mentioned in the article in GEM, Jimmy Carter, when he ran for president in 1976, said that he was going to decriminalize pot. And that's 31 years ago, so soon to be 32. So anyway, I do wish you the very best. I'm very glad that you came by the site and that you wish to be informed about the law and about the Compassionate Use Act. If I can be of service, there is a particular course that I offer. I call it a course. It's a legal consultation. It contains so much information that I've put together a 100-plus page booklet on the topic, and I give you that booklet to take home and keep and go over it with you for about an hour and a quarter, also answering questions and helping you to understand federal, state, and local law on the topic. I only charge $500 for that. I know that sounds like a lot for an hour and a quarter, but I promise you will get your money's worth. I've never had anyone upset at the end of the conference that they didn't get more information than they could possibly absorb. In fact, I blow it open so that someone who comes to me for that $500 is welcome to have a second briefer meeting with me so that they can ask any follow-up questions after reviewing the materials at home. So I recommend that anyone who's interested in the topic, please put me to work and let me give you that consultation. Do not give a large retainer to an attorney who wants to intimidate you with fear-mongering. Do not give a percentage of your dispensary to an attorney who is intimidating you. Large retainers and percentages like that are a conflict of interest and are improper. I think that you should be aware of getting ripped off. Other than that, I want to wish you the very best and encourage you to Google Ron Paul, and you'll see me out there on Melrose, probably with my son, waving flags and peace signs, trying to get people's consciousness going so that when Ron Paul is presented to the California voters that we can take action. That means that actually to take over the Republican Party, I know this sounds insane, it requires that people go ahead and register as Republicans so that they can vote in the Republican primaries. Those of you who are real politically savvy have already done so. So amazingly, I am now in the generation of new Republicans. I never registered for a political party before in my life, and I am now a registered Republican so that I can vote for Ron Paul in the California primary. So join me getting politically active. Let's get pot legal. Talk to you soon.